Okay, Madam Chair, we are live on YouTube.
We're not visible.
Oh, what happened there again? My goodness, I don't know why. Oh, wow. Technical difficulties. There we, oh, wait. Emma,
No.
why is that? No. Oh, there's me. I have no idea why this is happening. No idea. Oh, this is terrible. Okay, I'm going to have to take out the laptop. I don't know why. Okay, 1 second. Let me just, Here, excuse me, I'm gonna have to.
Of course, I know.
Set up. So sorry, my apologies. Everyone.
It was working
So,
before.
it was working
before you went live.
We had a meeting yesterday and it was, I don't know. That's okay.
You can't control it from that column or the. There is.
Is there?
Yeah, I put it on my,
Sorry I'm late.
Oh,
that's okay. We're having some technical difficulties. Bear with me.
That's what I had. Sorry.
It's okay. Okay, I'm gonna have to do that for now. Okay. Did you still hear us?
You can't control it from the participant.
Okay, they could still hear us.
I got you.
Now they can at least see us.
Okay.
Okay,
Good to go.
we're good to go.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. It is April 9th.
Now it's working.
Oh, and now it's working. After all
I
that,
have to click. I don't know.
There you are.
Okay, I'm gonna.
This is a meeting of the Zoning and Land Use Committee. I'm Stephanie Simone Mahaney, the chair. It is April 9th, 2025. We have two items on the agenda this evening. The first, we'll begin with the Department of City Planning. We have three representatives with us. We have Katie Martin, Veronica Brown, and David Weisglass. They will be presenting the City of Yes Housing Opportunity, a summarized version, not of the plan, but directing the presentation as some of the questions that we sent to them. And of course, after the presentation, the committee questions will be open for the committee to ask. And then if the public has questions after that. Okay, thank you. All right. Would you like to start?
Yeah,
Yes.
I'm gonna share.
So I'm Katie Martin.
Oh.
I'm,
And it went out again.
oh no.
Oh, there we go. Okay.
All right. Maybe my voice is making it go.
Yeah. You know what? Let's have both screens.
Yeah, it works. Just a backup. Maybe a little.
There you go. Okay.
Yeah.
Move it around.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. So I'm Katie Martin. I'm a borough planner with the Brooklyn office. I'm the liaison for CB10. I started with the city back in July. So I'm excited to be here and I'll let my colleagues introduce themselves.
I'm Veronica. I worked on CDVS for housing opportunity. I'm in the housing division at DCP, so one of the core members of the project team for this text amendment. You might remember I came to previous meetings during public review, so happy to answer any questions you have now about implementation and ward modifications.
I'm David Weissglass. I'm the team leader for Southern Brooklyn Community Districts. Also came out a little bit during public review, and I've met many of you, so I'm happy to be here as usual.
Thank you all.
Yeah. So just so y'all know kind of the way we're going through this, we're going to give a quick presentation and then, as Stephanie said, we'll have Q&A portion afterwards.
So just to clarify, this is with the city modification, city council
Yes.
modification.
Specifically speaking to city council modification. So this is not the same thing that y'all saw
Right.
last summer. So,
Right.
cool. Perfect. So yeah, this is the City of Yes for Housing Opportunity text amendment as it was adopted by City Council. So we'll highlight how the zoning changes affect Community Board 10 and how the final adopted text was changed from the original proposal, as y'all heard about it last summer during the formal public review process. Next slide. So City of Yes for Housing Opportunity is the most pro-housing zoning change in the history of New York City. It enables the creation of up to 82,000 new homes across the next 15 years, encouraging incremental growth throughout the city. The City Council also committed $5 billion in investments to infrastructure and housing alongside the zoning changes. And the text amendment included modifications which were responsive to public feedback. Next slide. So City of Yes for Housing Opportunity isn't one size fits all. It's a diverse array of zoning changes that respond to different neighborhood contexts while introducing new housing opportunities in every part of the city. First, it allows more missing middle housing or low-rise apartment buildings in our low-density areas. Zoning changes also aim to help homeowners in low-density neighborhoods by allowing them to add accessory dwelling units or ADUs to their homes. And providing small buildings with additional flexibility to adapt over time. The Universal Affordability Preference, UAP, allows bigger buildings for affordable housing in medium and high density districts as well. Across the city, the proposal would reduce residential parking mandates, lowering the cost of building new housing. So there are also a range of smaller changes, which we'll get into in Q&A. And then, of course, we'll be answering the questions that the board submitted. So next slide. And then next slide.
Okay.
We're going to start with the low density areas. So that's R1 through R5 zoning districts. Transit-oriented development enables low-rise buildings of 3 to 5 stories, depending upon the underlying zoning, near subway and rail stations. This change affects R3, R4, and R5 districts. This was a modification in response to community feedback. The proposal originally had included R1 and R2 zoning districts, but that's not how it was adopted, to respect single family character of these districts. And this, responds in part to CB10's recommendation that 1 and 2 family homes in low density districts should be excluded from the proposal. Next slide. So for sites to qualify for transit-oriented development, they must meet specific criteria seen on the map here. First, the site must be within the greater transit zone, which means it's on a block within a half a mile of a subway. Second, the lot must be over 5,000 square feet. So that's about twice the size of an average city lot. And finally, the lot must be located on the short end of a block or on a wide street, which zoning defines as 75 feet or wider. If sites meet these criteria, they're called qualifying residential sites in the zoning resolution. And they get access to heights and FARs necessary to build small apartment buildings. Next slide. City of Yes also re-legalized mixed-use apartments or buildings with ground floor commercial with a couple of floors of housing over top of it. That's pretty classic New York building type that exists along many low-density commercial corridors. Many overly complex zoning rules have made it almost impossible to build those buildings new at this point. So under these changes, floor area and height limits allow buildings with a commercial ground floor and then 2 to 4 stories of housing on top, depending upon the zoning district. So this actually, next slide. This proposal has limited applicability in CB10 because most of the commercial corridors in the area are actually zoned.
R6.
Yeah, R6 or above. So this only applies to R1 to R5. So it's, as you can see on the map, it's anywhere that there's a commercial overlay paired with low density. So R1 to R5 zoning districts. So during public review, some modifications were introduced to make sure this only applies to actual commercial areas. So for example, areas where there's like an isolated commercial district or like a block that's zoned for commercial, or areas that are zoned commercial, but there's actually like 1 to 2 family homes developed there. Those would not be eligible. Heights and FARs vary by zoning district and geography to enable 3 to 5 story buildings. Within the greater transit zone, which is shown here in gray, which is most of CB10, buildings are allowed to be 5 stories. Next slide. City of Yes also brings inclusionary housing to low density areas. This is a notable modification from the original proposal in response to community feedback on affordability in lower density areas. So new buildings with over 50,000 square feet of floor area or approximately 50 units will have to set aside a portion of their floor area for affordable housing. Affordable space will have to equal 20% of the market rate space in the building. So for an example, if you have 50 units, 42 will be market and 8 will be affordable. These homes are affordable for households at earning an average of 80% AMI. So for a family of 3, that's $111,840. And this helps create housing for all income levels in our lower density neighborhoods. Next slide. Zoning changes aim to give homeowners more flexibility. So a 1 or 2 family home will now be allowed to add a small accessory dwelling unit or an ADU. There are a range of types of ADUs. So we've got backyard cottages, garage conversions, basement apartments. The map shows here where the different types of the ADUs are excluded. So we'll go into that. Throughout the public process, we heard concerns about ADUs related to safety and neighborhood character, including in CB10's conditions. So the final text amendment includes some modifications from what was originally proposed. So first, basement ADUs and detached ADUs will not be allowed in areas susceptible to coastal or inland flooding. And the exact geographies are being developed right now with DEP. And will be established later this year. Second, detached ADUs are not allowed in historic districts or in R12A, R2A, or R3A contextual districts. Third, no detached ADUs will be allowed in the Bay Ridge Special District west of Ridge Boulevard. And that's what's shown in the like pink coral on this map here. And then finally, all ADUs have a homeowner occupancy requirement, meaning that the homeowner must live on the site when the ADU is originally created. So CB10's condition that building ADUs have a special permit or variance rather than having an as-of-right path would have made ADUs nearly impossible for homeowners to do without being professional developers themselves. So these changes that enable ADUs can also help homeowners who don't want to add an ADU, but need more flexibility to adapt or renovate their homes to meet their needs. So it just provides increases in height and FAR, as well as adjustments in yard regulations. So it's once again possible to build a two-family home in a two-family district. So next slide. So a concern with district fixes that we heard from CB10 was about the incentivization of teardowns to create McMansions with the FAR bumps that were intended to make two-family or multifamily buildings possible. To address that concern, the City Council modified the proposal so that additional FAR is restricted to lots below 4,000 square feet. Lots above 4,000 square feet will be limited to 0.6 FAR. So in CB10 and elsewhere in the city, we also had concerns about the reduction of the rear yard requirement from 30 feet to 20 feet. The final text was modified to maintain a 30-foot rear yard for lots 40 feet or less in width, with attached or semi-detached buildings. Next slide. Oh, sorry. We were supposed to change slides before. That was my bad.
Oh, okay. All
So
right.
this is what I just said.
Okay, very good. All right, so I'll go to the next slide.
And then next one, yeah. So we're gonna move on to our medium and high density areas. So that's R6 to R10. So they really focus on creating more opportunities for housing, including affordable housing in these districts. So to do this, City of Yes introduced the Universal Affordability Preference, or UAP. It allows apartment buildings to be at least 20% larger. So as long as the extra space is occupied by permanently affordable or supportive housing. By extending an as-of-right preference for affordable housing to every R6 to R10 district, UAP allows incremental housing growth in neighborhoods and encourages affordability throughout the city rather than just concentrating it in a few neighborhoods. Next slide. So UAP has an affordability requirement of 60% area median income, and area median income, or AMI, is a measure of affordability that's established at the federal government level. At 60% AMI, or for a family of three, it's $83,880. UAP would serve lower income New Yorkers more than previous zoning tools like voluntary inclusionary housing. UAP also serves New Yorkers at even lower income levels through income averaging, which means that like homes, like the level of affordability can be averaged out throughout a development. So there's a range of incomes that average out to the required affordability. So like, for example, a building could include 40% AMI, 60% AMI, and 80% AMI. And then if buildings have over 10,000 square feet of UAP floor area, it's required for them to have a 40% AMI. So that's really allowing even some of the lower income people to be able to live there. And it's called City Council, or City Council has called it deeper affordability. So as you can see by this map, generally this is along 3rd, 4th, and 5th Avenues, as well as some portions of Shore Road down on the southwest side. So next slide. And then next one. So yeah, finally, City of Yes has rolled back parking requirements in areas with good access to transit. This is a modification from the original proposal to make parking optional citywide. So instead, parking will be completely optional only in areas with the best access to transit, and that's in the dark blue up here. Parking requirements will be reduced, but not fully removed in areas that are less central, but still have transit access. And that's shown in the brighter blue here. And then the requirements remain largely the same as before City of Yes in areas without transit access here in green. So CB10 is, oh, next slide, yeah. So we zoomed in for you.
Okay, thank you.
CB10 is mostly in zone 2, which is that reduced, but still parking is required for the most part. And then there's a little bit of zone 3, though mostly that's in the Dyker
Dyker
Heights
Heights.
area. So citywide, certain types of housing, including affordable housing, conversions, missing middle housing, and ADUs are exempt from parking requirements. And then next slide. And then next slide. So yeah, the zoning text amendment represents the goals of community engagement going back to where we live, NYC, which is the city's comprehensive fair housing. Zoning, however, is only one tool in the city's toolbox when it comes to addressing crisis. Alongside with the City of Yes housing or the text amendment, City Council passed a $5 billion investment in housing and infrastructure. And we believe that City of Yes will allow our city to turn the tide on housing crisis. So thanks for listening, and we'll open it up for questions. Yeah, we don't need to go to the appendix.
Okay,
Only if we have
Okay.
questions that relate.
we're back.
Thank you very much for going through that.
Yeah.
Can we do our questions?
Yeah.
So
Mhm.
I'm just going to read them as they
Mhm.
were sent to you if you're then
That's fine.
prepared. So the committee can hear them as there is a committee.
Yeah, I'll move it. Yeah, David, great. Okay.
Okay. We sent questions to DCP prior to this meeting. So I'm going to start with the first one, which is growing concern about the displacement of residential apartments due to new commercial use allowances provided in the City of Yes economic opportunity that addressed the previous proposal, the one before the housing opportunity. Since these were among the more affordable apartments in the district, can you share if there were any modifications in the housing opportunity proposal to protect residential units or disincentivize conversion to commercial second floor rentals, especially in new developments?
Yeah, I think I can lead on all these questions, but I'll take support from Brooklyn office as appropriate. But so just to get everyone on the same page about what these two changes this question references are, City of Yes for Economic Opportunity made it possible to build 2 stories of commercial and residential on top. Before City of Yes for Economic Opportunity, you could do 2 stories of commercial and then no housing on top, or you could do 1 story of commercial and housing on top. You couldn't do both. So you had to make a choice. There was like a trade-off there. City of Yes for Economic Opportunity made it possible to do the 2 stories of commercial and residential on top. And so City of Yes for Housing Opportunity, as Katie has just gone through, was all about allowing for more housing throughout the city in appropriate locations, including commercial corridors like the town center proposal, and in those, universal affordability preference, many of those buildings will also be mixed use buildings. And so these, I think central to both of these 2 distinct text amendments was the idea that the zoning needs a certain amount of flexibility to support the city's planning goals. So to support the goals to have a thriving and sustainable economy, we need more flexibility with, uses and with where commercial businesses can locate, including that option for second floor commercial. We also need flexibility to make mixed use housing a reality. And that included changing some of the residential rules in City of Yes for Housing Opportunity. So there were no modifications to limit this scenario in which you have two stories of commercial and residential on top. We think that it's an exciting opportunity that some people may take advantage of in new buildings. I don't think I'd love to hear you mention these buildings. I'm not sure exactly what buildings you're referring to in this question, but I'm not sure that there's a reason to believe that the second story retail or second story commercial market is so strong that it would incentivize the conversion of residential units to commercial uses. That may not be an economically viable pathway, but in a new construction building, it may be a choice you want to make to do the 2 stories of commercial and residential, especially because before it's likely that person may have just done 2 stories of commercial and then stopped and not done any residential at all. So in that way, it is sort of growing the pie of housing in the area, which we think is really fundamental to addressing high housing costs in New York City.
Thank you. Does the committee want to ask any questions before I move on regarding that explanation?
Oh, that's a public resident. Do you want to take questions from the,
Should we proceed or do it question by question? Maybe we should do question by question.
Question.
Yes, if
Oh.
the public has a question on this.
okay. Okay, Anne, you had a question?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, was it a question on this topic?
Yes, on City of Yes. Now,
On this particular question?
no, not on this particular question, but on the idea of the concept of the City of Yes and, making it happen using, converting the commercial space for more housing. But does it address we're putting more people in a congested area? Doesn't that create more congestion and more strain on resources that are already strained within a congested area?
I think just to, I guess, clarify what I was saying is I don't think that, well, we can talk, the next question is actually about the conversion of non-residential uses into housing more specifically and how the proposal supports that. But I think, I guess, just to back up maybe to the, fundamentals of this proposal that we went through, in the public review process that you've all heard about, is that this is encouraging incremental growth citywide. This is not only affecting Bay Ridge, this is affecting every corner of the city. And we think that encouraging incremental housing growth at the citywide scale is actually the best way to avoid strain on resources or on, things that have capacity constraints and infrastructure concerns. By creating incremental growth citywide, we can play to our strengths, creating housing near transit, creating housing in commercial corridors, rather than concentrating housing in just a few neighborhoods, which actually is the pre-existing pattern of housing that New York City has been developing under, for the past couple decades.
Okay, thank you. We're going to move on to in terms of CB10, we're unclear about the implications of potential changes related to converting non-residential buildings into housing.
Yeah.
That's a big one. Do you have any, can you offer a picture of what that would look like, particularly in CB10, please?
Yeah. So we didn't get into this proposal in this abbreviated presentation, but one of the proposals in City of Yes for Housing Opportunity was to extend something called Article 1, Chapter 5 regulations citywide. So the zoning had an existing set of rules that grants flexibility to non-residential buildings to convert into housing. Sometimes non-residential buildings need a little more flexibility in some of the bulk requirements so that they can become housing. Just because commercial buildings, especially ones built before existing zoning, don't necessarily conform to what zoning is today. So, there have been successful examples of people using the Article 1, Chapter 5 regulations to create housing, like in Lower Manhattan, for example, which is one of the limited areas of the city where it's previously available. So, there's a big development that opened recently on Wall Street. There's one like on Liberty. So after sort of 9/11, there was a considerable move in Lower Manhattan to use these rules and successfully created a lot of housing under these rules. So they're well-established rules, but they had very limited applicability. They were only available in basically the central parts of like office districts. They're available in Midtown and Lower Manhattan. And they were only available for buildings built before 1961 or before 1977. The cutoff date was different based on area. And so now we've extended those same rules citywide. So Article 1, Chapter 5 rules can now be used in every part of the city, anywhere housing is allowed, not in a manufacturing district, but anywhere housing is allowed. And they can also be used for any building built prior to 1991. So we brought up the year a little closer. Obviously, Bay Ridge or Brooklyn 10 does not have, like these large office buildings like the financial district does that are going to be converting into housing. Sometimes converting into housing is, from non-residential building can be quite an expensive and difficult enterprise, but there are potential opportunities in, the lower density parts of the city for things like disused schools or underused schools, I should say, and religious buildings to convert into housing using these rules. It applies to any non-residential use converting into
In
housing.
CB10, there are a significant number of houses of worship. So those would be subject to development, potential development.
If they, sold and chose to be converted into residential uses, they could use these Article 1, Chapter 5 rules. That any non-residential use can use these rules.
Okay, and with expanded, especially if it's in a transit zone, then would they have expanded FAR and height? Would there be different regulations applicable to them?
Yeah, well, so the Article 1, Chapter 5 rules are about when you're taking, they're really focused on when you're taking the existing building
okay,
and just
so-
building housing. Like they're just, taking your existing building and turning it into housing rather than, they would follow the FARs that are like otherwise of it. If they were like building a new building on the site, for example, that's not really Article 1, Chapter 5. That's a separate, they would follow like the underlying.
So no
zoning.
major physical modifications to the existing building that would expand it beyond its existing.
Oh, yeah, I mean, a site could potentially do that. That's sort of the separate proposals that we just walked through.
Okay.
So a site, obviously, like if, that would be up to the owner of the site to determine if it makes sense for, a building to convert into housing and use the existing building, or it's like redevelop as a new building and use, like, for example, the transit oriented development or town center, whatever applies to them that we walked through. And those, might be depending on like the status and like architecture of the building or like how difficult it would be to convert, people would come to different decisions. But, in like, these are often used in, buildings like, again, to go back to a Manhattan example, which isn't exactly, analogous, but like where it would be extremely difficult and, wasteful to like redevelop this existing, architecturally significant building on Wall Street, it's actually, a viable option to convert that into housing. So that's, up to the calculus of the developer, I suppose. But,
Thank you. In terms of the special districts, we have the Bay Ridge special district. How were special districts affected?
Yeah, so this is a great sort of follow-up because I know one of the biggest concerns raised at the public meeting was about Visitation Academy.
Yes.
So one of the modifications was to exempt Visitation Academy, excuse me, is not affected by the qualifying residential sites rules that Katie went through. So the transit oriented development proposal, which gives, additional FAR and the ability to build a multifamily building. There's a special provision now in the Bay Ridge Special District that says sites above this square footage existing on the date of enactment of CHO, which was December 5th, that sites that existed at that size, which the only site that is Visitation Academy, are not qualifying residential sites. So that was one of the most significant. And I'll just as a skipping ahead in the question list just for a second, we had another question about Visitation Academy. There was if that site was subdivided to below that threshold, would it then qualify? And the answer is no. The site existing on language, while a bit confusing, is intended to be exactly address that concern that you can't subdivide out of it, like emergent. So it is, existing. The
That is
other
a concern.
yeah. But we've confirmed that language on our end. That's exactly why that existing on language was included. The other significant modification we already went through in the presentation, which was about not allowing backyard accessory dwelling units west of Ridge Boulevard. So in that pink area of the map we showed. There were no other changes to the Bay Ridge Special District. The Bay Ridge Special District, except for those two additions I just went through, is really focused on community facility uses, and we didn't touch those since this was a text amendment that was focused on housing.
Okay, thank you. Committee members, if you have any questions at any point, just please throw a hand up. Otherwise, I'm going to just continue with the question list. I think just regarding UAP, I just wanted to clarify, you give percentages. I think in one of the maybe it was in the modifications, we saw absolute numbers. So the concern was that those numbers would not change over time, but you're using percentages here of AMI.
Yeah, so just to explain like sort of how area median income works or what exactly that is. As Katie mentioned in the presentation, area median income is calculated by the federal government, and it's calculated on the regional level. So for the New York City metropolitan area on an annual basis, they're updated every year. And so when we say 60% area median income in 2024, that's $83,000. So that's why we use those numbers, just because, so you have a sense of context. Next year they will be slightly different, when they're recalculated. But they will, they'll continue to be 60% area median income. And what exactly 60% of area median income equals in dollars will shift depending on,
Right.
prices and things like, housing costs and how it's calculated according to like housing costs and income, so.
Okay, just wanted to make sure.
Yeah.
And then going back to ADUs, I mean, this has been a persistent question or many questions in terms of the interagency cooperation or answers or a long time ago, we asked, what is the FDNY stance on this? What is DOB? What is happening? My understanding is that although the city of Yes has liberalized the zoning rules to allow for ADUs, you still need DOB permits. Is that correct? Or what, you still need additional information?
Yeah, so I guess I'll take that and first I'll cover sort of like what DOB and FDNY is doing right now in terms of like rulemaking, and then maybe about like the process for actually getting an ADU, about the permits. But just in terms of like interagency coordination during the public review process and the even before we went into public review, the policy development process, City Hall convened an interagency working group that had representatives from FDNY, from DOB, from the Mayor's Office of Climate and Environmental Justice, every relevant, close to every agency was involved in, just getting on the same page with accessory dwelling units and deciding what beyond zoning might need to change or be accounted for when we're considering how these units can be safely created. And so when a City of Yes for Housing Opportunity passed at City Council, the City Council passed some companion legislation which requires certain rules to be established by 6 months from the date of enactment. So it was City of Yes for Housing Opportunity was enacted in December, so 6 months is about June. So right now, those partner agencies like DOB, FDNY, et cetera, are all working on creating on that rulemaking process. So the most important set of rules, I don't say the most important, but one of the rules we heard a lot about in the public review process was, and that Katie's touched on, was flood geographies. So establishing not just coastal flood geographies where accessory dwelling units can't be allowed, but also inland flood geographies, since inland flooding is, a severe issue we know, and it's, has in Hurricane Ida led to the loss of life, people living in existing illegal basement units. So we have so the Mayor's Office of Climate and Environmental Justice and DEP is actually leading that effort to create those geographies and establish clear rules about if you're in one of those geographies, you can't build an accessory dwelling unit. There's also rulemaking about radon testing for accessory dwelling units and rulemaking about legalizing if someone has an illegal existing ADU or basement. DOB and HPD are leading rules for the legalization process of those. And so that legalizing existing illegal unit will require a series of checkpoints and like rules about at what point what is the minimum standard and at what point they have to conform with higher standards until they can become fully compliant as a legal unit. That was responsive to some legislation that was passed at the state level, actually allowing New York City to have a legalization program. Just to quickly touch on the next segment, which is like sort of, I think part of your question about like permitting and like what is the actual process for like.
And you don't have to go into that, granular explanation.
Yeah, I know.
But I just want.
But yeah, just to be clear, there's a lot of it we get a lot of questions about is so just as of right, like but as of right, you still have to go to DOB and get a permit. And so they still have to review your plans and make sure that you're complying with zoning. So similar to building, like any other building, there is a permitting process in which plans are reviewed and to make sure that you're complying and have,
And that would have to take into consideration also other things that we were concerned about, sewer, electricity, the ability to bring all of that to a backyard.
Yeah, I can touch on that briefly. And that's basically the same as kind of like the building permit process in general, right?
Okay.
So yes, you need to meet the zoning resolution, of course, but you also need to meet fire code, you need to meet a health code, you need to be, egress requirements, electrical code, right? It's the same for anything else, right? I can build a home that meets the height limits or something, or the setbacks of the zoning resolution, but if it's made with asbestos or something, obviously I'm not allowed to do that. So there's a number of codes that it needs to be, that it needs to meet, and DOB will still review all throughout all of them.
And so you think residents will be aware of this, that they won't just throw up a cottage in the backyard without going through all of the necessary steps?
Well, if people are gonna subvert the rules, they could kind of do that now,
Yeah, and I guess no more so that people would build a house with it good DOB, but I think that is, one thing I'll note that this does involve increase sort of like enforcement capacity, including sort of like proactive enforcement or needs for enforcement. And part of the companion to City of Essex Housing Opportunity, which didn't maybe get as much attention as it deserves, is funding for 200 extra staff positions at DOB and HPD to focus on enforcement. And so HPD will also have staff people to assist homeowners, like to provide technical assistance. We're already fielding quite a few questions about, what is the process for this?
Okay.
So HPD will be the one leading any sort of like outreach to homeowners, which, maybe at some point we could provide an update about once that's something, the working group's still meeting and is still working on those sort of issues. So maybe once they have more like materials for that and that staff person in place and things like that, it would be a good time to provide like some sort of update about that.
Okay, thank you. One of the next question, actually, one of the bigger ones about integrating all three proposals, all, carbon neutrality, economic opportunity, and housing opportunity. Has that been looked at with the overlay of each proposals?
Yeah, so these were 3 separate text amendments, each
Mhm.
with their own public review process and different and so on. But I think that it's important to note that the City of Essex Housing Opportunity proposal was drafted with zoning text incorporating the previous 2 text amendments, meaning that when this was drafted, it already incorporated the text from the previous text amendments and the various interactions in the text that would happen. If there are specific questions about interactions, if, for example, you receive an application before you and they're, you're curious about how they're drawing on these proposals together, we're happy to answer like specific questions about a building that incorporates, for example, a 2nd-story commercial with residential on top.
Battery on the roof. I mean, there are so many elements to each of the proposals, so.
Yeah, so I think that, short answer is that the text was incorporated, as they were each passed subsequently. But we're happy to answer additional
And no
questions.
conflicts found? Has a review been done? I mean, no contradictions in the texts?
As the text was being drafted, I think that was being done. There was that's part of sort of the zoning divisions. This is obviously on big scale, but that's what the zoning division is sort of there for at DCB, is like when we're making updates to the zoning text, is reviewing and making sure that is carried through the entire zoning text and things like that. So that's what they were very paying attention to. But happy to answer questions as you start to wrap your minds around these proposals in real buildings. Yeah.
It's a Herculean task,
Yeah.
but we adjust that one.
Mhm.
The district fixes, I guess, just needing a better understanding of what the changes in the rear yards mean and what were the modifications, as there were many concerns about reduction of the rear yard 30-foot requirement.
Yeah, so this was a concern. The reduction of the rear yard used to be 30 feet. CHO proposed reducing it to 20 feet across the board, the residential rear yard requirement. We heard concerns from this, not just from the community board, but really all over the city, including high density areas. And what the ultimate modification is that it is maintained at 30 feet, the required rear yard, if the building is attached or semi-attached, and the lot is less than 40 feet in width. Sometimes it's called the donut, like when you have a bunch of attached or
That's exactly what we
buildings.
were afraid of, yeah.
Yeah, and so many community boards were concerned about the preservation of the donut when you have the attached buildings running around, sort of like a shared space internal to the block. And so that's why the 30 feet was preserved in that location. One other thing I'll note related to required rear yards, which we didn't touch on in the presentation, but is maybe more relevant to the low density context, is that accessory dwelling units are limited in how much of a required rear yard they can cover. So the original, and they're actually further reduced in a modification at city council. So they can only occupy a third of the required rear yard, which would be less probably of your, if you had a larger that might be less than your backyard, like colloquially defined, but so they're limited in how much coverage of the required rear yard they can take up.
Okay. All right. The last question that we had, I mean, it's a pretty big question, very broad, about what we wanted a sample block. I mean, what would a block in CB10 look like with these modifications or with the application of the City of Yes for housing opportunity? Were you able to?
So unfortunately, we didn't have the capacity to like model a sample block or anything like that this time for you guys. But I think one thing that I would just emphasize in response to this question is that this proposal provides a lot of optionality to, like in flexibility. That's what it was really about. but then the uptake is expected to, vary and be sort of interspersed throughout the city. So I think on any given block, you might see one or two accessory dwelling units. You might see a transit development building, like, qualifying residential sites, if, type building, but these will be, like the entire city has now, has seen these changes. So it's not as if we'll see, they've been limited to one block in which one block is going to redevelop tomorrow. There'll be, I think it's an incremental growth, as I said, it's sort of, as I opened it in the beginning and I'll close it now, where you'll see some of these over time on any given block, but maybe not, it's not like even if every lot on that block has the option to add an accessory dwelling unit, it's unlikely everyone will want to or have the, money to. So, we only expect maybe a few.
Okay, just a quick question that is not on the list, but I was thinking about it when you talked about town center zoning. The restrictions are that if there are homes on the block, maybe I haven't explained it properly, but you wouldn't apply the additional commercial space. And what happens if those homes are torn down?
So, yes, I'll direct you for just your reference, I'll explain it, but the definition of qualifying residential sites is a wealth of information. So that sort of spells out the criteria for how you could be, town center, transit-oriented development. And so one modification is that, the commercial overlay for it to qualify for what we refer to as town center has to be the entire, extension of a block front, and it has to also be on an adjacent block. So you can't just, if you have like one isolated block front, it doesn't qualify.
Okay.
And then the other one, which you're mentioning, is that if 50% of the block is one or two family homes, then it can't develop a commercial overlay. This could change over time. So
Okay,
someone could redevelop as not town center, before CHO was passed, these locations already had the ability in any low density district with a commercial overlay, already had the nominal ability to build a multifamily mixed use building. It was just quite difficult. But let's say right now this block is, 75% single or two family homes. If they could redevelop as smaller mixed use buildings today, they'd be using like essentially the previous rules, not the new qualifying residential site rules. And if that happened, then those sites would, and enough of that happened that it was over 50%, they could then qualify for town center.
All right.
So it is, a bit of, that would be a long-term sort of thing, but that is how the rule works.
Okay, great, thank you. Committee members, do you have any questions? Oh, they're back.
Yes, they're back. Before we release city planning.
I know there's a lot of information. Any input, comments, questions?
Okay.
Are there any questions from the public?
No.
There's someone up there.
Oh, Doris,
Doris.
yeah.
I just raised my hand. You didn't miss me. I just raised my hand. I
Okay.
remember at an early presentation, someone asked if basements are converted or ADUs are added, how would this impact the real estate tax for that property?
Yeah, so your tax class is, like the break in tax class is at 4 family or above or under 4 family. So like if you were to build a building that had more than 4 units, there's a significant increase in your taxes because you enter into a different tax class. Accessory dwelling units are only available for 1 and 2 family buildings, meaning the most units you can have on that site is 3. So there isn't a time in which adding an accessory dwelling unit will enter you into a new tax class. Your taxes are dependent on, the value of your home, and it's possible that making any renovation to your home, including an accessory dwelling unit, would increase the value of your home. But it's not going to kick you into a new tax class, which is when you see a significant sort of jump in your taxes. There's limits also on there's caps on how much your property taxes can increase each year. So based on value, based on your assessed value. So
okay, thank you. Any other members?
Okay, there are
Or
some
you
public
have
questions.
Sure.
All right, there's one in the Q&A from Daniel Mowery. What will the process be going forward to make any future modifications if it becomes apparent that there are loopholes or changes that are resulting in unintended actions?
we will, I guess, we're continuing to sort of we, as housing division, monitor where housing is built in the city. That's one of our sort of like core functions outside of big proposals like this one is we do the housing database, which releases it's a comprehensive record of every housing unit that's been continue to do that. It will also be thoughtfully monitoring what's permitted and et cetera under these rules. We will be like, I guess, monitoring the situation. We're also working closely with, like our colleagues at DOB who are responsible for enforcement. So if there's any like ambiguity in the zoning text, that's something that we work on with the Department of Buildings on. And they've, been trained on these rules and things like that. So I guess that's the best sort of how we're monitoring. Any future changes would obviously require like a new text amendment and be like public review procedure, and that's not planned at this time. But we'll be monitoring sort of the outcomes of this proposal, I guess is the best way to
Great.
answer that right now.
Okay, and Victoria Hoffman. Victoria, you should be able to unmute. Victoria?
Can you hear me?
I hear you, yes.
Okay, hi. I'm concerned about enforcement since we have a huge problem with illegal conversions now. And a lot of our quality housing has been subdivided into unsafe conditions. It's made every square inch of property more expensive. Our property taxes have gone out. And since the city doesn't seem to be able to control that, how are they going to enforce these new things?
Good question. I guess I'll reiterate that this did include additional money as a companion to the text amendment to create new enforcement positions, 200 staff positions, which is a significant number of positions specifically dedicated to enforcement, inspection, proactively going out there. Which that's really something that is limited by budget constraints. So it's great to have the money for 200 new staff positions to work on enforcement, which is something the city recognizes it needs to improve upon. But in terms of sort of, I guess, like just to take a step back, enforcement more generally, these proposals are generally like focused on creating more housing so that things like subdividing existing units and creating unsafe conditions. We know there's a lot of people, living in like illegal rooming houses or things like that elsewhere in the city, and that's a direct consequence of our housing shortage. And by creating pathways for safe, legal housing, including, new housing, which is easier to sort of like review and enforce, someone creating a building rather than proactively finding out if someone has converted their existing building, is I think one of our best ways to address those conditions is to create a safe place for everyone to live, so that people aren't forced into those unsafe conditions. But it is something, enforcement is something the city realizes we need to improve upon, and I'm glad that there's money dedicated to that as part of this project.
Okay.
So I have a question. Yeah. Because we see this with a living, we have limited liability companies coming in, buying single family homes and then carving them up as they wish. And the Department of Buildings comes to inspect, they knock on the door 3 times, nobody answers, and then they go away. And the limited liability company continues to do as they please. So to talk about enforcement with more people, to me, that just sounds like more knocks on the door that aren't answered. It doesn't sound like anything really substantive. So how can we be convinced that this is a substantive proposal where a limited liability corporation will be held accountable for their illegal conversions? Because it's happening on that block and there's no accountability.
And just to support my neighbor, that when you said it's to give people an affordable place to live, unfortunately, there are a lot of bad actors that are investing these LLCs, and what they're simply doing is it's not to provide housing for people, it's to maximize profitability.
Right.
Because when you have 3 floors, right, an illegal conversion of a basement, and you have 2 other floors, and you have on average 6 people on each floor, and each person is paying $1,000 a month, that's a pretty nice business. So I think one of the things that the major bone of contention that many people have in this particular community, because in different neighborhoods, there's gonna be different issues. And in this neighborhood, this is a very prevalent, growing, metastasizing problem. And 200 more inspectors, that's great, but that's for the entire city. And that's not a lot of people. And when they come, because we complain all the time, everyone knows the game. Knock 3 times, don't answer, closed, cannot gain access. So until that changes, this is only this, the city of yes proposals in certain neighborhoods such as this is only going to exacerbate this issue.
Yeah, I think, I mean, if we were only doing the 200 new, if that's what I was here to tell you about, there was 200 new staff level, people. That would obviously, just be more sort of knocks on the door, as you say, like not addressing the root causes of the issue. But it would say the root cause of this issue is our extremely tight land market and housing market. So in a situation like we had before CDPS for housing opportunity, in which there were so few, available opportunities for housing to be built across the city, the ones that were available were, only available to like the highest bidder, like someone, a highly capitalized company, including that's why, LLCs, why other sort of like investment firms have gotten into the like single family home game, because it's very profitable. When something's very scarce, when there's very little housing available, it's more profitable. So by opening up the land market or the housing market to, more parts of the city by making our zoning more flexible, we think we're gonna get the root cause of that scarcity issue. And so that addresses like the root cause of why that's happening, at the same time going back to the sort of on the ground enforcement of what's already there.
And I respect what you're saying, but I don't quite see how this addresses any type of housing issue for 1-family homes or 2-family homes that suddenly become, these aren't 3 apartments. These are, as I said, 4 to 6 people living on each floor. There are 10 people to 12 people on average living on our block in each building and then it goes with, everything else that follows that. So this is not to address, I don't think anybody in this room wants anybody to be homeless. Excuse me, but this is simply a profit-driven business that LLCs are coming into neighborhoods and they are just, and they really are, it's becoming blighted. Those houses become blighted. They don't live there. They will claim they live there, but they don't. So I think part of the problem that happens in the city is the faith that this is all, on paper, this sounds lovely. People are gonna have housing, it's gonna be nice, everybody's gonna be happy. But that's not the reality in this particular district. Maybe in just another district, Brownstone, Brooklyn, those are different issues. But here, it's a very prevalent issue, it's a growing issue, and it is drastically changing characters in neighborhoods, not on a positive note.
If I may elaborate a bit on Veronica's response, I think that's exactly right? A lot of these people are coming in because of profit driven. You're exactly correct about that. And the city of yes, there's no, is not lying about that. It's directly addressed in the proposal, right? And so what we see is, well, why are they coming in and doing that? And it's a problem in CB10, and it is a problem in other places as well. We see reports from, real estate, REITs and LLCs that publicly say they specifically target housing markets that are tight, right? Housing markets with significant constraints, significant regulations, because they know that they can get more profit, right? If they look at a single family home and say, well, I can stuff 1 million people in here and I know that people are going to pay, because where else are they going to go, right? That's the root cause that we're trying to address. What we want to have is a situation in which people, renters, have options, so that they're not saying, all right, well, if I want to live in the city, I have to be stuffed into this little box, right? If they have more options now, all of a sudden, that changes a bit of the supply and demand market, right? And so what we believe to be true, and this is based on a lot of our research, is that we're going to see fewer of those situations when all of a sudden people have more options, right? If people are desperate, then they'll, stuff themselves into any box that they can. And that's the situation we see now. What we want to see is a situation where people have options. And so people are offering, housing, whether it's a property owner doing so in good faith or an LLC, right? Where they all of a sudden need to look and say, okay, well, I'm not gonna get a ton of money from subdividing this house because I'm not gonna get the income. I don't have people just waiting around the block, you know? They could go elsewhere because now there's more options. That's what we're seeking to address here.
I'm afraid those changes won't happen soon enough for CB10 is effective or many of the other areas as well. There's a lot to say on the subject, but I'd like to move on to maybe another question. Someone else?
Victoria has another question. Let's see. I'm sorry, Victoria, you had another question?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I think the problem for me, and I've been involved with preservation a long time, but I think about preservation of community. Bay Ridge is like a model community. It's built with with housing diversity, housing stock diversity, which has made us a very diverse neighborhood with age, with ethnicity, and with economics. And I feel what is happening is it's destroying that. So I understand what you're trying to achieve. They have that in our community. So what's happening is people who have lived here for generations are pushed out. We have to compete with the entire globe to try to stay in our neighborhoods now because money's coming from all over. And we also have a lot of housing that was built for seniors, et cetera, because of a need, and people are getting blocked out of that as well. So as much as you think this is helping, this is actually destroying our model. And there has to be some kind of balance between the neighbors and, us, because it's just too much. So when you talk logically, it makes sense, but we have a model community. I wish you had looked at our neighborhood and tried to replicate those things instead of what we're getting. That's all I have to say.
Thank you, Victoria. Okay.
You're welcome.
Okay, that's it. We'll close this portion.
Thank you all very, very much for coming this evening and for presenting and answering so many questions.
Leave for the.
Oh, no, you're welcome to
You're
stay.
welcome to stay.
Yeah. We know the
We just
time, the
wanted to,
hour.
Move on to the
I mean,
second.
y'all are welcome.
Yeah, I may leave.
Okay.
Thank
Since
you for
it's,
having me.
since I work.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
But thank you for your time this evening. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
You have the presentation?
Yes, I have the presentation. All right, so I'm going to share my screen. Hopefully it'll work.
Thank you.
You're gonna. Yeah.
We're going to address the second item on the agenda,
Wait, let me see.
which is not this, but.
Okay, hold on. Share.
So the transcript's available, if he's got to write his report, right?
Yeah, it's on YouTube.
On
So,
YouTube.
yeah,
Probably
so
not
you
until
could.
tomorrow or?
No, it'll
No?
be on now. It's live now. So you just go to Community Board 10 Brooklyn YouTube and it'll be there.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for
Okay,
attending.
take
Have a
care.
good
Bye
night.
bye. Okay.
Quick question, when you mentioned visitation, so what would be? Is it to preserve the actual, the building, the footprints of the building, that it can't be knocked down and build something
For
there?
landmarking, that would
Right, is
be,
that gonna be landmarked, is that?
oh,
Yeah,
a
right.
request for
Oh.
evaluation was submitted.
Yeah, an RFE was submitted to Landmarks Preservation and Commission LPC. We haven't heard back. It was made some time ago,
It was several months.
several
ago.
months ago.
Last year.
So right now the underlying zoning there is R31, I believe, which is also 1 and 2 family districts. So if a developer were to purchase it, that's the underlying zoning right now that they would have to work with. So that's what it means. It's right now the zoning is as it exists today, and that has not changed with CYHO.
Did they R31 back way back when, or was that one of those lots?
Yeah.
I thought that was not zoned.
It was.
Okay, so
Ye-
Steve was, he was right on.
Right, yeah. There was some wow, it's a long time ago, right? The case for preservation zoning. No, the entire district was zoned at that
Except
time.
the highways and things.
Right, yeah.
And does anyone have any idea as to what is happening with the lot that is on Fourth Avenue Fourth and between 76th and 77th. It's been. It just has scaffolding around it. It has been, they built it a little
The
bit.
other end of Clavin.
Sorry.
The other end of
Uh,
Clavin funeral
it's-
homes at the other end of
Yes,
that block.
yes.
Yeah.
yes. Is there any?
It's been unfinished.
Yeah, I don't, yeah, I'm not really sure.
On that, I'm sure.
Okay, all
No,
right.
but we do, I just want to keep going, and then if there are other questions later, certainly would be happy to answer or try to. We're.
Yes.
do
So,
we-
right, the second part of, we prepared a brief presentation just to give a little bit of an overview of a meeting we had a few months ago. So just by way of background, because there's some members of the public here, we had a wonderful summer intern who provided a great presentation on potential landmark historic preservation sites in community board 10. It's a project that we had wanted to begin and have had some community-related requests. And she did that presentation for us in the fall. And so this is a follow-up meeting to the ongoing conversation of moving forward with this Community Board 10 project. So the board did submit 3 public landmark RFEs. That's a request for evaluation to the Landmarks Preservation Commission for consideration. The first was the High School of Telecommunications at 350 67th Street. The second was the Firehouse Engine Company at 9219 Fifth Avenue. And the third was the Firehouse Engine Company in Dyker Heights, Engine 284. So those were just recently submitted, and we hope to have an update soon for you all. So in that review, there was a lot of brainstorming, future landmarking and planning proposals in CB10. Priorities for landmarking, we took a look at the public buildings, individual landmarks first. Community and stakeholder involvement, engaging our local elected officials, organizations like the Bay Ridge Historical Society, residents and other, preservation groups in the district, creating future goals and strategies to developing a comprehensive list of landmarks, mapping historic areas, and promoting awareness of under-recognized sites. And then taking a look at former RFE submissions, the Senator Street Historic District, the 74th Street 400 block, Ovington Avenue from Ridge Boulevard to 3rd Avenue, just to name a few. Engagement and collaboration, hoping to invite representatives from the Bay Ridge Historical Society to a future meeting, coordinating with the Bay Ridge Conservancy or other preservation-focused organizations. We had one time had a presentation from HDC to identify additional sites and districts for possible landmarking. And committee members really wanted to roll up their sleeves and assign areas in the district to committee members. This is Bay Ridge, but it's Bay Ridge and also not forgetting Dyker Heights, to identify historic sites and rows of buildings, to share and annotate findings on a central map so that we would avoid duplication and ensure comprehensive coverage. So Stephanie did a great job in Google Maps, and she took the district and divided it into
With
a map.
Josephine's help.
With my help. I helped put the numbers on the,
Clean.
it was yeah, pretty interesting trying to get this done, but we did it. And then we just assigned committee members to different sectors. I mean, I'll turn it over to you, Stephanie. I know you have them. It's hard to see on the map, but you have the geographies.
Yes, I do. I just wanted to highlight that the pins that are already there in pink are the sites that have already been identified or previously identified, I should say, especially with Kelly Carroll's help, as potential landmarking sites. There are 3 pins that are purple. One is in district or in that sector 6, sector 2, and sector 8. And those are the 3 sites that Josephine just mentioned that for which the RFEs have just been submitted to the Landmarks Preservation Commission. And we divided this because there are 9 committee members, but it worked out well that the Bay Ridge and Dyker Heights, all of CB10, have been divided into 9 sectors, and each of the committee members and Josephine has been assigned a section that you can, whether you would like to walk, drive, or from memory, provide your recommendations as to which sites you think we should consider for landmarking or discuss. I have a list. I've shared, or we can reshare, the Google map from which this has been screenshotted. It's an active map that you can put your own pins on, and on the left-hand side, there's a column of it names all of the sites that are identified by these pink pins, so that you don't have to duplicate the efforts. The list is very clear here on the left of the screen to which sections you've been assigned, but I am available to assist anyone. If you'd like to go together, if you'd like to discuss anything with me, or if I can facilitate in any way your reconnaissance, I'd be happy to. Are there any questions regarding Anne?
Yes, are we looking first for individual buildings, or do you think we can also entertain blocks?
I think both.
Not blocks, but
like
street runs between intersecting streets.
Right. I mean, I think
especially in the case of row houses.
Right. I think that one of our first objectives is to look for low-hanging fruit. Like if there's a public building in particular, that would be great if you identify something. But I think all of it is open for consideration. I know we spoke more than once about not blocks, as you said, but row houses, section. Yes, absolutely.
Thank you.
And also, since there are in the room, I know everyone can't see, but we have members of 74th Street who had submitted an RFE to LPC, as well as Senator Street, who I'm looking at a beautiful picture, by the way. I don't know if did you see that, Eric? Did you notice that? Yeah. Yeah, Ron took that picture and we framed it, and it's up there. So there are, lots of blocks in the northern section, and that was, some feedback that we received after 74th Street is perhaps looking in that northern section of Bay Ridge to combine groups of different blocks to see if there was interest in putting together a few blocks in an RFP. 74th Street 400 block, yeah. And then there's Ovington Avenue. I guess it's between Ridge and Third. Your block of Senator Street, and then there was also interest in 73rd Street. We've heard. I think it was 400 block that we had heard from, and 76th Street. 76th Street block. So there's a few there, and I don't know, so I mean, in part of the review, it's going to be looking at some of the similarities, if any, with architects and time periods of development and history. That's also something that was discussed. Oh, there's three hands. Okay.
Pierre?
I'm wondering what's likely to qualify to get a historic district placed on it? Because we could come up with hundreds of older buildings or whatever, but what's the point if the city is just not gonna, if there's no hope?
I mean, I think going back to something like Kelly Carroll had said, that certainly the public buildings would be the first, but I think having just developing our own list is beneficial. We're not going to submit everything, or we need the community support for many things. The community board is not going to submit RFEs on its own unless it is a public building. But I think just being prepared and identifying many potential sites. Josephine, do you want?
We can't define, is there a way to define what might be a potential site?
Yeah, I think we could get something I think we had something from HDC when we spoke with them on different criteria to look for. So we could share that. I think there was with the reconnaissance report, there was a one pager.
Or for the architect, there are a couple of criteria.
Architect, period, significance,
so
anything that's notable in history, right. Famous people residing there. But the I think the goal of doing block by block was not forgetting any, there might be, I think it was Doris who said there might be, a block in Bay Ridge that has this unique house that no one really knows about. It looks kind of interesting. Maybe we could jot it down and do some history, or if we have interns over the summer that can help. And certainly HDC said they would be helpful. I mean, we did start with the reconnaissance report, that was done a number of years ago. And we just wanted to really just build off of that with those locations to see if there was any that were missed.
We can get the criteria.
We could
to
get
you.
the criteria before out to you.
That'd be great.
Okay, Doris?
I have the Fort Hamilton section, but I am particularly interested in the row of houses on Ridge Boulevard between 91st Street and 92nd Street on the west side of the street. They're incredibly beautiful and almost unchanged since when they were built.
Mm,
And we know someone who lives there.
Okay. Very
Yes,
good.
Making note of that. Barbara?
Well, I'm acquainted with that block as well, and I hear the residents are very cohesive and they're very proud of what they have there. They have book clubs, they have all kinds of meetings, so it's an ongoing thing. And I just wanted to ask about the map that you showed. Is there another addition to the map that shows exactly where these buildings are? They
Yeah,
look like they're in
the buildings that are identified by the markers.
Yes, yes.
Yes, there's a shared Google map. We can share.
We're going to
those
share
with
that
you.
link with
Yeah.
you.
And there's a
Okay,
whole
oh,
column
good.
on the left side. And then in terms of the boundaries of your sections, I don't know how visible they are to you in your emails, but I can also send out the street boundaries for each of those sections.
Yeah,
Right,
and
I
I'll
can
send
go
out the,
there.
right,
I
and the
could go
Google
there
link.
and
Yeah, the
walk
Google link
through.
will help.
Yeah, thank you. And when do you want this by?
Not until June. We will
Oh, good. okay.
revisit that. We have a busy May.
Good, good, okay, go slow.
Yes.
Is there a way for us to know who's been assigned to the area that surrounds us and includes us?
Yes.
Yes. I mean,
Well, you had it on the map.
yeah. It was,
Yeah, it was on the map. Let's see. I'm sorry.
That's not normal. Broad district, I don't know who they.
we just up. So this one.
Yeah. I think it's section 2. Right? That's Carmelo. Yes.
Oh.
Yes, that's the Third Avenue, Bay Ridge Parkway, and
Yes.
Fifth Avenue.
Right. This block here.
Mhm.
We'll connect. You're welcome.
That is the same.
And you're in the same, yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
That's my neighborhood.
Yes, that's Carmelo. He lives there too. So good. Okay.
Is there anyone
School, okay.
in the Q&A or?
Oh, oh, I'm sorry, Danielle. That was from earlier. All right, we'll make sure we get those questions to city planning for you. Yeah. Okay. Oh, Anne.
Anne?
Yeah, is both side, the district switches at 14th Avenue, correct?
Correct.
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
I'm thinking about St. Bernadette and its courtyard and its grotto.
Yeah, there was an intern years ago who submitted a two requests. One was for state registry of the Saida House, and the second was the entrance near Dyker Beach Golf Course, which both
Yes.
only 2 in Dyker Heights on the National Registry, but no landmarks at all in Dyker Heights. So that would be interesting too, to see if there's any interest from Dyker Heights residents on either 1 or 2 of those locations. And there might be more that I have a farmhouse on my block from the late 1800s that has a lot of history. It'd be interesting to learn. And what we also talked about was a number of the sites on the reconnaissance report to put some of these histories online on our website. So share some of the.
Diker Heights, the mansions that were built there by Walter, what's his name?
Yes.
I mean, just because they're a lot more recent, doesn't mean that they don't qualify for a landmark status. Because you could see a time in the future where all of that would disappear as well. Yeah, and something like that needs to, the memory of it needs to be preserved. A thought that age doesn't necessarily qualify as the only type of landmark.
Who is speaking? Maybe I need to connect with them.
Okay, that's Ron Gross.
Okay.
Wait, I can't see. Wait, I'm gonna turn the camera. Wait a second. There, Ron, I'll make it, and Eric, you could say.
Hello.
Hi. Hi.
Nice to see you.
Josephine, maybe you share my phone number with that group.
Okay, will do.
Okay.
Are there any more questions? Oh, no, Anne.
Anne. And
No.
is your, oh no, okay. Okay.
Nothing else? Okay, and anyone in the room, nothing else on it? No. Okay.
Thank you.
We want to get it moving. Yes.
Because we just felt, we never even got an answer.
Right. So, the case of Center Street, they submitted an RFE and never received an answer. And then we followed up recently.
Nothing.
Do you know that we followed up recently and still haven't received an answer?
Thank you.
My information is that this current administration is not a fan of landmarking at all.
There have been fewer landmarks under this administration than any previous administration.
Exactly. Exactly, because developers are not a fan of landmarks.
Well, this current administration, remember, things are gonna change based on what our president wants, not on what our.
Okay.
Well, I'd like to thank the committee. Thank you very much. And also thank you in advance for doing your sightseeing of Bay Ridge and Diker Heights. I will send out that information, or Josephine will send out the information regarding the Google Maps, the shared link, and also the street boundaries. If you have any questions, please just ask. Hope you have a good night.
All right.
Thank you for the wonderful
Before we
meeting.
adjourn, I would really like to commend Stephanie on the incredible
Yes.
she's done on the city of Yes.
Yes.
Incredible.
Just keep
Awesome
going.
job.
It's the only thing we can't say no to.
Well, I hope you all have a wonderful evening. Thank